I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. Might sound a little fuzzy today. Recording remotely from upstate New York. You know who else has been in upstate New York recently? It's Andrew Kuo.
Wow. Yeah, I spent our nation's birthday, holiday, the celebration of cop fireworks up in Pelham, Westchester County. Half an hour upstate, way upstate, half an hour, you can't walk. And near Tarrytown, the home of the Knicks.
So you were up there. You probably sampled some garbage plates, some chicken riggies, your swilling Genesee beer. Like, welcome to God's country, Andrew.
Some wings from a buffalo. I did it. I had them all. I jumped on a trampoline. My friend ate enchilada. What'd you do for this holiday week?
For the 4th of July, I didn't really do anything because this was a part planning issue on my own, of my own fault, where I realized only late in the day, too late in the game, that the fireworks had been moved over from the east side to the west side and would no longer be visible in North Brooklyn. So I'd spent all day hanging out with some friends, and in my mind, we were going to like wander over towards the water and see the fireworks. And I did that, and I was like, wow, no one's over here. It's pretty quiet. And then the truth became apparent.
Wow.
So I just saw people lighting things off in the streets and running around and having little wars and blowing stuff up. So my 4th of July was not nearly as patriotic as yours, which was full of beef on weck and delicacies such as Speedies from Binghamton and other upstate finery.
It was a quick jaunt, and I spent the night at home in the middle of Brooklyn, and there were so many fireworks. The next morning, there was just like milk crates of discarded like paper tubes and boxes, like the Hawk Tuah 5000, like it's incredible. The culture, shout out to Pen and Pixel Design, but the culture of these fireworks, the branding is incredible.
It does feel like fireworks and pornography have their thumb on the pulse of America.
How so? I mean, you mean more so than something like Twitter or TikTok? Does pornography, you mean like when like a politician gets big, they have like lookalikes?
That, and also even the technology, just the visuals and the, pornography being such a huge industry is a little bit different than fireworks, which are probably a sizable industry, but not the same as porn. But porn just has to be both on the cutting edge, but also there to satisfy all of your, step sibling needs.
Yeah, I still have yet to see a Vision Pro in the wild, but I'm assuming they're all sequestered in the dungeons of people's houses where they enjoy private things.
And they're just watching Roman candles all day.
Yeah. No, but it was, as the kids say, lit in my neighborhood for 4th of July. Pelham, I just spent the morning there. It's a bunch of families, a bunch of screaming toddlers, a bunch of preteens. I'm at that stage of my life, which is a joy and deeply uninteresting.
So do you catch a Sabres game? Any other, maybe a little hike in the Adirondacks?
I threw a stone, hit Toronto, Montreal, Canada in general.
When I was sitting in the park with my friend, as it was nightfall, and because we couldn't see any fireworks, so we were just sort of listening to them around and hanging out. And it reminded me of those days when we would record our pods as fireworks were going off. And there's something I kind of love about it, where it was proof of life in that moment, where I know there were the rumors about the police or the CIA. It was
we lost our damn minds. It was amazing.
It was a psyop to mess with the protests, whatever it was, that the fireworks were not.
This is the cops.
that it wasn't simply people being bored and out of school and out of work with something to do in the summer. But there was something about hearing the fireworks go off in that moment that made you, I don't know, happy that people were outside. And this same sort of sense. And also it was a little drizzly. So it had this feel of distant thunder. But they were, as you said, they were just going off constantly. It was just over and over and over for a long period of time. I don't know. I kind of thought it was amazing.
Yeah, I was saying I was in a dark room, kind of, since it's Del Boquo Vista over here. My bedtime is early, and I had a little too many enchiladas, so my stomach was grumbling. Sadly, no Paul Pierce action. Just it stayed in the stomach, and it sounded like it did outside. So I wasn't sure if it was thunder, the fireworks, or my stomach, because it was like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it sounds like you were at one with the universe.
I was at one with the PSYOP cops and the universe. Did you hear about that? I randomly came across this story. The guy who played in Disneyland, who is Gaston, is that his name, from Shrek? Like, was at a fireworks party, put a box of fireworks on his head, and blew up his entire head.
So I heard about the guy who died from putting fireworks on his head. I didn't know there was a Shrek tie-in.
There might be two viral firework deaths this week, but this one guy masqueraded as the handsome prince character in Disneyland. And everyone's like, oh, he was such a fun-loving guy. He was smart, and he was a prankster. He had a little bit to drink. He thought it was funny. We told him not to do it. Next thing we look over, he didn't have a head.
I wouldn't advise that, and I'm no expert on, pyrotechnics.
Apparently.
But that seems like a foolish move.
But
when I was in the city earlier last week, a lot of people were lighting up some powerful, very noisy explosives. And I think people were fairly prudent with them in terms of having, long wicks or however you would describe those, the things you ignite, the wiring, whatever. Mm-hmm. The fuses, sorry. Mm-hmm. And I also did see people having the Roman candle fights where they're like shooting at each other from like a roof to the sidewalk and vice versa. And there's some videos, as they now are annually. There's one Bill Strobeck took a couple years ago. And then I saw similar ones where it's people just waging war in the streets of New York with Roman candles and fireworks exploding. And it looks super dramatic. But couldn't you lose an eye? Like, isn't that just like,
absolutely.
Isn't that like just part of the charm?
Well, it's like a game of horse, right? At some point, you ask yourself, am I brave enough to up the ante and shoot from behind the backboard? Or am I going to play it safe and just like hit the foul shot and be like, you have like a 40% chance of making this, whatever, 60, 70, 80, depending on your opponent. Because if you see a bunch of fireworks, the first instinct is to be like, how close to blowing my hand off like Jason Pierre-Paul can I get? How close to death can I stare at?
Yeah, one of my buddies, just like last week, found some sort of firework on the street that hadn't gone off, and he snapped it in two and then lit the middle part, and then it blew up in his hands. And he's like, ha, 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 and he looks over and his hands were super singed, and then, a week and a half later, he's got all these blisters and wounds on them. And I was like, that was kind of your fault.
Yep. Yeah, and I don't like the
And kinda is being friendly.
I don't like the whole Darwin at work. The whole are you that stupid? I mean, we cannot evolve as a species without going to the edge of our imagination.
Yeah, I also think there is a sense of a lack of sympathy when we talk about the Darwin Awards.
Yeah.
It's well, that sucks, and it's sad that someone would die doing something stupid, but we don't need to necessarily mock them.
Right.
It also feels like this early vestige of internet culture where it was edgy then, and now it just seems rooted in the same lack of sympathy and kind of shithead mockery, but now it's mainstream, which takes away from it being at all edgelordy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a normie way not to have sympathy. And I'm you know what? Normies are supposed to have sympathy.
Right. Enough sympathy in the middle, right? Just enough sympathy. Not zero sympathy. That is not normie. That is just dickheads. No,
yeah, and you see these, right? But I'm saying you see these videos of parkour where guys are, it's kind of what you said, playing horse but with your life, and
yeah.
It's oh, that's so cool. You can do a flip over that thing. But what if I do a flip over that thing and if I mess up, I die? Well, yeah, that is terrifying and brave and stupid or whatever adjective you want to throw at it. But then one of those guys dies and you're ha ha, Darwin.
You're right. And I guess one of the big jumps of our entire crew is discovery of fire. An edgelord has to be the first to light the fire. An edgelord has to be the first one to try an oyster. Crazy. Or to try a fish. Insane. Can you imagine being the first one to try a lobster? Just wild shit. It's yo, Tom over there ate one of those weird bugs that came out of the water. I am sticking to these apples.
There's a algo on Instagram and the Reels specifically that is occasionally just throws me Asian people in Asia eating weird things. I don't know why. This is not a particular interest of mine, but they're in the feed. No pun intended.
Was it a 5'5" short king eating enchiladas in Pelham?
With the tumultuousness of the skies matched only by the roiling of his abdomen. No, I don't know why I get these. Maybe because I click on them on occasion. Yeah. But there's one recently, and it was an older Asian woman killing a snake and then using its blood to make an omelet. Gnarly, but okay, right. Whatever. We eat different stuff in different places. But this cross-cultural sort of interaction leads to everyone just saying, new SARS dropped, new COVID here,
right?
COVID loading.
I mean,
maybe we're too interconnected, Andrew.
I find that stuff shocking too, but nothing is as weird as a hot dog, right? And, I watched the Coney Island 4th of July festivities. I've seen Kobayashi do his thing. The Kobayashi erasure is crazy. Everyone talks about Chestnut. Kobayashi is the Allen Iverson of all of this. And
absolutely.
And Chestnut is just a facsimile of Iverson, whoever that may be. Sebastian Telfair.
Steve Francis.
Shout out to the Knicks legend. That's the wet market stuff is unnerving. I have trouble with it, but kind of grew up around here. But it's not lost on me that hot dogs are the strangest thing, and we don't really want to get into some of the delicacies Americans enjoy and how strange they are. Hamburgers are not normal things necessarily. Someone may eat a snake and be like, well, you eat a burger patty that's sourced from 400 different animals.
Well, right. Hey, we're gonna have a clam bake, and then we're gonna have some soft shell crab. I'm these are just big weird insects. They live in the water. Mm-hmm. If we saw a video on YouTube of someone eating a crab and we're unfamiliar with them, we would lose our mind.
I mean, how adventurous do you get with food? Because like, we're kind of post the nose to tail culture, but like, you know, we eat burgers, we pay a lot of money for steaks, but we don't really eat like ears and eyeballs and stuff that other cultures do. Is that more disgusting than like a shoulder?
We've decided collectively that it is. It's just whatever's more differentiated than being anonymous piece of meat. Like, oh, this isn't weird. It's like a homogeneous piece of a slab.
I will
this
not
must
eat
be
beef
normal.
tongue, but I will eat a beef hot dog.
Exactly. I mean, personally, I've eaten like an eyeball or an ear, and
Sure, same.
and that's all fine. I just think that once you've made the decision we're eating animals, you're not allowed to think other animals are weird to eat.
I'm kind of
Like
with that. Yeah.
You've crossed the Rubicon into eating other living beings and not eating vegetables. Then the rest is just, cultural relativism.
There are some mind benders though, like breakfast chicken sausage and eggs, like mother and child reunion. Shout out to Paul Simon. It is a strange psychological line you have to cross. I still stand by the idea that we collectively should eat less meat. I've been eating much less meat, but like at that point, I do not discriminate, kind of. And stuff is weird. Like, if an eyeball is looking at you on the 4th of July, you'll be like, can you liquefy and foam that up and put it into a casing and grill it and put it into a potato bun for me?
That would be great with some ketchup on it.
Yeah.
The only time I've eaten an eyeball knowingly was an Italian restaurant around Gramercy Park. I think it was called Myelina's, something like that. I believe it's gone now.
Myelina.
Myelina, yeah. Name was something along those lines. And you could order like a pig's head, and it would come out, and it was like half of it. And it was there. You could see the teeth and the snout and the eyeball just like
A pig
looking at
or
you.
a sheep? A pig, right?
It was a pig. It was a
Right,
pig.
okay.
And the eyeball was right there. And I will say, despite it being a bit gruesome as an item that was on your plate, it also did provide like real life context to like what you're doing versus, hey, this is a bunch of ground protein that is in a sterilized styrofoam container with plastic. I guess you can put this into the form of a burger and put cheese on it. It was like, oh no, you're eating a living being that had thoughts and emotions, and its eye is there looking up at you. So like there was a deeper connection that I'm not going to say I feel exactly what an Iroquois Native American did, but I think it's pretty close, Andrew.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about what the bear is, right? We're in season 3 of this extremely popular show, and it is the first season. The rat king, the handsome rat, the fuckable rat, as they say, takes over this sandwich shop and.
Wait, the rat fucker? Is this related to
No.
Richard Nixon and
people
the
want to fuck the
plumbers?
rat. They want to fuck
okay.
the rat. The rat doesn't want to fuck other things. I mean, I'm assuming he does because he's a red-blooded rat. But I forgot who called him. Was it the New York Times that called like this new genre of handsome men rat handsome?
No, I think it was an internet phenomenon in the same way that women were describing themselves as deer pretty, bunny pretty, cat pretty, fox pretty, whatever. Then there was a conversation I remember having at the time with some women about like what should men be. It's like bear handsome, wolf handsome, and rat handsome. I think is kind of an offshoot of this concept.
Is this swagger jacking the LGBTQI plus scene because there are bears and otters and other terms that I don't know of, but this has been going on for generations, right?
I think sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of it is, yeah. But it's look. I mean, we're all talking about animal nicknames and attractiveness. Like this is all swirling together, of course.
What
But
animal? What animal do you want to fuck the most?
I feel like that's. Yeah, I'm not going to even really indulge in that question, Andrew.
It's like giving you a box of Hawk Tuah Roman candles. You can either fire them off like a normal person, or you can blow your brains out.
At least we were ahead of the curve on the Hawk Tuah blowback, as we could call it.
Shout out to the phenomenon. There's like a mini documentary about her, about where she's from. There's music. She's like, yo, all you bootleggers, sort of like the Cookies interns, like all you bootleggers knocking off my image, my brand, my lawyers are coming after you. The Cookies interns are very into bootlegs, so bootleg all you want. It's a free-for-all. We do not own this stuff. The world is a conversation. But the Hawk Tuah woman is coming after you. She's going to launch her store,
can say
maybe later this month.
There's one thing you can say about the Hawk Tuah girl is that she's litigious.
I mean, we might have a prosecutor as president, so it is timely.
But back to the bear thing here. And, you got waylaid trying to get me to admit to bestiality fantasies, and I didn't buy it. I was not going to do it. So, Andrew, back to your bear discussion.
Right.
Where were you going with that?
Well, I think we're at kind of an inflection point for food fans and food culture, right? Because we had the meteoric rise of Food Network, Kingmaker kind of stuff. Was that a intended pun or just a brilliant one? A meteoric rise.
The meteoric rise. Hawk Tuah's meteoric rise.
Yeah, meteoric. So there's vegetarians out there. We gotta shout out to our plant-loving friends or plant-hating friends. Stop eating my vegetarian homies. Vegetable.
Is that? Hold on. What? Is there a legitimate argument here?
Oof.
To say that?
Here we go.
No, to say that plants are just as alive as animals. That we're just being biased as warm-blooded mammals towards creatures that are like us. Like a tree. A tree's like, dude, I'm alive as well.
There are smart people who think plants express fear and show defense mechanisms that are clearly obvious that we ignore because they don't remind us of us. They don't have eyes, they don't have hands, they don't have mouths. But when you cut grass, there's no reason it should smell like cut grass. That's the defense mechanism for grass. Some plants emit gases or chemicals. Some plants like fold up when they sense danger. And plants have a nervous system. The whole forest is a network, kind of run by fungi.
I mean, they go to sleep.
Plants, for all extensive purposes, are living, feeling things that think, which is weird, right? If they could talk, they'd be like, please don't eat me. Unlike chickens, if they could talk, they'd be like, "Bakak, eat the fuck out of me. Deep fry me, throw me in Szechuan peppercorns, what the fuck ever. Bakak."
Turn me into a chicken sausage that'll be eaten with my own eggs. I find that a really ironic fate.
Yeah. But yeah, that is, I remember there was a second where a vegan person tried to claim oysters were allowable in their culture because there was no, I forget the qualifications, but there was no nervous system maybe. There was no brain matter in the thing, and biologists were quick to point out that there was indeed a nervous system, and they are animals and they have feelings and they don't want to be eaten. So that was a good attempt at trying to have an espresso martini and a half dozen oysters.
All right, sorry. Back to the bear.
All right, it's whack, right? Like, so the first season, this fuckable rat takes over this beloved sandwich shop. Second season kind of turns it into a fine dining establishment. I have not watched the third season. Throughout the whole thing, this is the natural progression of Garden State, Little Miss Sunshine. If you're a fan of like not Haruki Murakami's writing. Who's that author? I always get him. Is it Haruki Murakami? Yes.
I think you're talking about Murakami.
I get confused with Takeshi Murakami. More Akamis.
Sounds like someone's been secretly reading.
No, I can't do it. He has a new short story in The New Yorker, and it's about more Beatles stuff. I can't do it. But it's that sentimentality, right? That Norwegian Wood sentimentality of like this wistful kind of coming of age set in the point of view of a young man and the things that happen around him. And it's been updated to add in generational trauma, hilariously, and like addiction and crime. It seems concocted in a boardroom. It smelled like that from the first season, but inexplicably, it became such a big hit. I watched the whole thing. I hate watched the whole thing. It was kind of delicious in that way, no pun intended. And it borrowed from like David Gelb stuff, like Chef's Table, Hero Dreams of Sushi, which I really disliked. But I love Chef's Table. Hero Dreams of Sushi was just like kind of too militaristic, and it's about an older generation kind of punishing a younger generation. We'll get to the election soon in this perfect pod, the battle of the generations. And Anthony Bourdain, right? And it had this like overarching like food is not just something you eat, it is life. And I'm like, oh, get the fuck out of here. Fine, let's do this Murakami shit. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Also, I was secretly reading some Alice Munro short stories recently.
Yikes. Post
I know.
Pre-scandal?
You mean after she died?
Or before the article dropped a couple days ago?
Oh, I didn't see that because I don't really read. What are they saying?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Her daughter was sexually abused by Alice Munro's husband, her stepfather, and Alice Munro knew about it and chose the father over her daughter.
I knew there was something wrong with those short stories.
Wait, did you just bring up Alice Munro not knowing that happened this weekend?
Yeah.
Weird. You are the internet. You should get the internet tattooed on your face.
I should get the internet on my phone so I can check this thing out.
Yeah, so Alice Munro, no-go as of this weekend.
Oh.
Yes. Sorry to break it to you, man. So adjust your take accordingly. Tread lightly.
I guess I was going to say she made...
Good luck.
Well, I was going to say, and this is ironic considering the news that's breaking on this pod, is that she often writes from the perspective of like a young girl.
Yeah.
And I was just going to bring that into, I think that's much easier to convey and more effective in short stories or in literature because you can write in that tone of voice. And it's much tougher to do that in cinema from the perspective of like a child seeing the world. It can be done. People try to do it a lot. But I think like the young man coming of age is kind of easier than doing it because there's something about the written word where you're talking about not understanding what's happening. It's harder to convey that in a visual language.
I kind of agree. There are certain advantages of the format of a movie over like words. But I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to think of like the best coming of age movies.
I mean, something like Wonder Years did a good job, but so much of that was based on the narration, though, right?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I think the Wonder Years celebrated anniversary. Maybe it was like the last episode or something. So people were playing, and it took place on July 4th. So people were playing the end of that. And like that show, that sentiment has not aged well, right? Like, people don't relish in talking about that hit show in the same way they relish talking about Three's Company, Seinfeld, Mork and Mindy, I don't know, ER, just, I don't know why I said Mork and Mindy, but Taxi, MASH.
Laverne and Shirley, for example.
Yeah. But, like, that's a cringe show. You can't rewatch that and be like, this is so awesome. You're like, ooh, this is tough. And to boomerang it back to the Bear, even rewatching old Anthony Bourdain episodes of his numerous shows, art doesn't kind of age with you. And if you grow up, the art kind of stays the same age. Certain artworks can transform and help you as you change, but most don't, right? And I think the Bear, post-COVID through 2024, as we're stressed out about this generationally, the pitting of the generations in November's election, is like the wrong timing for this coming of age kind of story that we were kind of more ready for 3 or 4 years ago. There is
like you're talking about, like, a young Joe Biden that finally assumes the mantle of the presidency. This up and comer, flush with new ideas, takes the reins of a young nation and leads us to the promised land.
Well, it's kind of like the storied conflict between the silent generation and the baby boomers, just pitted against each other constantly. Joe Biden, the silent generation, against this young whippersnapper trying to take his place in Donald Trump.
Are you talking about this greenhorn? I would never give him the nuclear codes.
This little newsboy over here trying to eat my lunch. We have a very...
This is not a brat summer, Donald. Sorry.
We have a very good friend who has figured out an amazing conversational trick, which is if he doesn't know about something and it's presented to him, he says it's over and it's already whack. If he knows about it and you don't know about it, he's privy to the next thing that you will eventually find out about. It's a great kind of catch-22 or checkmate of talking about everything, and I enjoyed a lot. I think backlash is, if we're going to talk about the Bear, the backlash exists as a phenomenon outside the artwork. I think season 3, you're kind of like setting yourself up for the girls' kind of like relitigation, just being like, I never liked this thing because season 3 sucks, right? Or you can watch the first season of The Bear, episode 1, and be like, I hate this, everyone loves it, this is whack already. And I think the phenomenon of this show has to be talked about as an independent cycling of something people like and an artwork onto itself.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how The Bear relates culturally, because personally I watched a few episodes. I didn't think it was bad. I just didn't really think it was for me. And a little bit that was kind of weirdly sculpted by friends who work in the same industry. And their take is based on a whole other side of authenticity, because you had the public and people who worked in that industry saying, well, this is so real. We also drink out of those like plastic, quart containers. This is authentic. Look, there's all these people involved with this. There's these consultants.
Right.
They know what they're doing.
3 all day.
Right. This is the real verbiage that goes on in the kitchen. This is the energy of it. And then some other people I knew who worked in that industry would say the opposite. It's fake. It's bullshit. I don't know why. But I felt as if people were too caught up in the energy and the snappiness and whether or not it was real or not.
For sure.
Ultimately, I just kind of didn't care about the show or its characters.
All the characters are bad people. They commit crimes. They're either suffering from trauma that makes them bad, whatever. I find them to be kind of bros you do not want to have a beer with, and beer. The authenticity thing, right? We always come back to that. It's like, well, that's a real chef. That's real. I just don't care about that either. The food is however much I love eating out and all that. I don't know. It's not like Hollywood culture or like music beef. Like food stuff is like inherently uncool. As we're debating recently about what is cool on X, like, is the bear cool? I'm like, no, it's not. Like, having an ensemble cast arguing over like Thanksgiving dinner is like so wrought with uncoolness. Is Kendrick Lamar cool? Like, sadly, maybe not. Is Mark Zuckerberg cool? It's like, no. But we're maybe arguing about the wrong thing, because the thing I love so much is Twitter. As soon as it's there, it cannot be cool by definition, right?
I mean, I think there's a lot of accusations you've levied.
That's what I do. That's what I do. I'm alleying up. Whoop it down, buddy.
But the sort of vestiges of Bourdain as the badass chef, as
yeah,
like, yeah, we're drinking, we're smoking, we're fucking, we're
listening
cooking,
to Iggy,
we're cooking meals.
Iggy Pop and the Stooges. Ever heard of the Brian Jonestown Massacre? That's right. We're baking potatoes with him.
We're brining chicken. Yeah, you heard me.
In the studio with more Chiba.
But that macho element of chefs, which, you know, we're getting tattoos, we're doing blow, we are.
I got a
we
whisk
go
on
hard.
my arm. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you know, here's a cassoulet. It's like, all right,
Delicious.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But I don't know of other professions that have, I guess, benefited from the kind of rebranding. And you could take this back to like Marco Pierre in London, who had the same kind of badass celebrity chef. It's now such a part of kitchen culture that it's just accepted. Like, you see someone with like rolled up sleeves and tattoos, and you're like, oh, you look like a guy who works in a kitchen. You look like a, or you make cocktails. One of the two.
Yeah.
It's such a part of the, I don't know, service industry, for lack of a better term. But I can't think of another profession like that, which has benefited to the same degree culturally. It's like, yeah, you know, the people who clean hotel rooms, secretly badasses.
I think in my world, painters, especially insecure men who are painters, who think about aesthetics and beauty, have to like cover themselves in tattoos and say things like, this is kind of a job, like, this is a 9 to 5. You know, there's very famous artists who talk like that. And, you know, I think the greatest chefs we all talk about are our moms, our grandmothers, you know, and like the magic that happens in the kitchen, the sorcery, the wands are held by like the women in my childhood. And for men to interlope and become the head chefs at these restaurants, I feel like there is a certain kind of masculinity conversation. You know, like, no, I'm badass. I'm showing up with a sleeve of tattoos next season, and I will eventually do a podcast and parlay that into a head coaching job at the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, I hear you. Writers have kind of a different trajectory that feels somewhat based on this idea of, I don't know, Truman Capote and the salon and like, you know, drinking whiskey and watching bullfights. There's a masculinity to it that I think is still at the corners of writing.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but that's kind of been replaced in modern society, I think. And you know, there's still like the manly writer idea. And I think of our buddy, you know, Sean Thor Conroe, who, you know, he's writing autofiction,
Baller.
He's ripping cigs, he's hitting jump shots, he's doing push-ups. It's like he still has
Nash
that
type game. Yeah,
that concept of the masculine writer. But overall, it's really become like, in many ways, like a woman's job. Like there are, I just mean the popularity of successful writers, hugely dominated by women at this point, especially in fiction, in columnists all over the place. And it's sort of antithetical to that original version of what like a writer was supposed to be in this, we can call it misogynistic, whatever it was, this conceit. But yeah, that's a field that has shifted in one direction, I think, while, yes, like the kitchen has become the place for true badasses. They have knives, Andrew.
Right. They have knives, and they work with fire, sometimes directly over the fire. It's hot
Sometimes
in the kitchen.
salt.
Yeah. The heat of the kitchen is not only from the stove. And, I used to have a friend who worked at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Midtown. And they were like, it is so crazy in there and stressful and demanding that our whole crew is on pills and drugs and having sex in the walk-ins and on the ground after closing time and just drinking until morning because we're so wired. And I'm like, that's terrifying and fascinating. And there's a story there, but it's not the one that ever gets to our eyeballs, right? The stories that I kind of hear, I mean, the influence of Chef's Table should not be underestimated, right? Like this flower, I remember the last scene of Girls, and it pans out on that Brooklyn street, and there's like a acoustic guitar, I think. And it kind of puts a bow on the many things that happens throughout the life of that show, which I think ages really well because it's so skeptical. But that is the Wonder Years effect, is kind of the one we always get with food culture. And I don't think it's a big enough world to give us anything else.
Well, the Wonder Years effect, if we're pinning it down, we're not talking about how the Wonder Years is viewed today. We're talking about almost approaching the world with a childlike sense of nostalgia and
through the lens of an older person.
Right. When things were confusing as a child, but you didn't actually have to know what was going on. I'm trying to think of the best way of saying that. But like you could be aware of conflicts between, say, generations, between your sister and your father. And
silent boomer.
And, the warmongers and the hawks and the peaceniks and the hippies. These were these conflicts at the time were confusing, but there was a simplicity to that confusion as well. We didn't have to take sides. And I think a lot of that does inform some of these political stances where there's this fine line between saying we should take it back to when we were all one. We were all friends back in the day. We got along. Everyone knew how to coexist. And then saying, MAGA, bitch, which means something totally different. Like that sense of nostalgia can be weaponized, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, whether it's kind of keeping a show running, getting a second season, getting to a third season. I'm a Rites of Spring fan. The World Is My Fuse, talking about fuses. Like, I love this stuff. I reside in the world of Fred Savage. I was trying to think of a 21 Savage joke here, but I like this stuff, but my Gen X alarm sounds, my Spidey sense sounds kind of, when I see something like The Bear, I'm like, this seems a little manufactured to me. It's not skeptical enough. It's not funny enough. It just seems like it's trying to sell me something authentic, not in its language in the kitchen, but of its emotion. Being like, the Weezer, like, I had an abusive stepfather. It's like, no, he made that all up. Like, Weezer's popularity was kind of manufactured by Rivers Cuomo. He had a wonderful childhood, and he kind of recently came out and was like, oh yeah, I just made that up for the song. But the 3 generations it took to get to this kind of discussion about trauma is like exhausting, I think, and not untrue, but seeing John Mulvaney kind of playing this out, knowing his history and knowing how he got to a guest spot in the Bear, feels like I'm being fucked with.
I mean, this idea of authenticity, common theme on the Cookies Hoops podcast, and
ethical chefs,
ethical entertainment.
Yeah.
But I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. Just that show Eric, when the most cloying examples of trying to find details to show that you are authentic, that you know what you're talking about, and getting them wrong is the most cardinal sin. Like, don't include details then. Just tell your story. But when someone goes out of their way to add in extraneous details to prove that they're authentic and gets them wrong, that's the curse of death.
So you're saying if your opponent is flailing, like kind of going senile, the best thing to do is just play golf for 11 days, maybe 12 days straight. Stay out of the limelight, no mics.
Yes.
I mean, it's a good strategy, right? Like, let democratic morons kill themselves and just, like, chill.
Yeah. So last week we talked about your man Joltin' Joe Biden, and we talked about his.
Yeah. He's on an island, man. No one knows what's going on in that brain.
No, it's good. ISO Joe is good. So ISO Joe is even more isolated than normal.
Yeah.
Post debate, and last one we talked about that calamitous performance. But since then, the tenor has changed in the discussion from the mainstream press, from the neolibs who have supported him and been Team ISO Joe, setting him up for ISO possessions. Now there's a large contingency of people outside of real ISO Joe guys who are like, all right, you got to replace him. Let me say this. I think the population of people who are into Joe Biden and willing to vote for him right now, and the people who would vote for his replacement level Democrat, is like pretty 1-to-1. I don't think there are that many like ISO Joe stands that would be reluctant to vote for another conventional Democrat. That's just my opinion.
You mean it doesn't matter who's there? People who would vote for Joe Biden would just vote for the Democratic Party?
I believe so. There may be a few who wouldn't, but I think that percentage of people who would dip out on a different candidate is far smaller than the percentage of people who are unwilling to vote for Joe but would vote for replacement level Democrat.
Right. Joe's war. I saw Joe's war. I think the Democrats are not good strategists, to say the least, but they do win the popular vote every election. So there is something formidable there that they are doing correctly, right? The GOP is in shambles as much as the Democratic Party is. And of course, whoever wins gets to write the present history. But I do think they sat down, and whoever is in charge over there is like, we can't flip them, because all the GOP has to do is say, we're not giving the country a choice. We just throw whoever we want up there without having to do a primary. And we've done this once with Hillary Clinton. We're doing it again with Gavin Newsom or whoever, whoever it may be. So that's a political third rail. The path of least resistance might be just keeping this old guy up there. And Joe Biden might be like, I'm too old. I don't want to do this. And it's like, Joe, you have to do it. Just go up there and project confidence as best you can, because you are the easiest way to win this game of horse?
I think at this point, it's kind of clear that people, or at least a segment of the voting demographic, would rather have a somewhat cognizant, and I'm saying somewhat sane, these are weird terms to apply to Donald Trump, but like a somewhat present dictator than a non-entity as president. Because what's actually the argument when you say, well, you're voting for this guy who's clearly senile, who's going to be 85 years old if he wins this election, and most likely will die in office? Who are we voting for? Like, well, you're voting for the shadowy cabal of advisors.
But it's a distinct difference in the other shadowy cabal of advisors. There's a distinct difference.
Oh, I get that, but I just mean it's not really a choice. It's saying to people, you're voting for like the Democrats versus a president. I think people,
Which people
want
do,
America. I think
right?
no, they do.
They
But
register
I think
for
Americans,
their parties. Yeah.
I think Americans still want us to have like a figurehead. They want us to have someone who can meet with other world leaders. I don't believe that the average American is saying, we'll vote for this, demented king, but we trust that his advisors behind him are great.
The irony is, like, which demented king are we talking about? Because they're both
I know.
to fucking lunch.
I get why this is odd. That's why present is even a better word, because, they're both demented.
They're both not present either, right? Like, it's just two different kinds of dementia, or two different kinds of behavior that are the same thing. It's like it's an underhanded free throw versus an overhanded free throw.
I'm not disputing that, but I just think like Joe Biden, his inability to walk and talk and think, like you can't have this guy really be president. You can't.
But Trump can't walk and talk or think.
I mean,
can he? Like, it's been well documented.
Better than Joe, I guess.
Are you sure? I mean, I am open to this idea, but Trump is far worse than Joe Biden. Like, far worse than Joe Biden.
Well, no, yes. I'm not arguing who's better politically.
No, just in performance-wise, his rallies are a mess. He said to inject bleach into your veins. Like, what are we talking about? He told scientists to put sunshine in our blood. Like, come on now, right?
King.
Yeah. I mean, it's the dead internet theory. I think the dead internet theory starts with Trump being like, the stuff we consume, even on TV, newspapers, it all involves like media, is not actually how people feel. I think the people who go on with their days, with their families, upstate, eating chicken riggies, aren't like debating the nuances of the shadowy cabal of our political parties. They're just like, I just don't like one of them. And then those are the people that end up making a big difference in our elections. So we may be talking about all this stuff online, and it may trickle out into real life. But the dead internet theory is just like 10% loading, right? It's not 100% there yet. So the things we talk about have not crossed over into real life.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is that Joe Biden is not offering you a alternative to Trump specifically at this point because he is just a non-entity. He's a hologram. He went cadaver mode on us.
But you accuse him of being a genocidal maniac. So which one is it? Is he benign, or does he have a point of view?
Well, I mean, I think we know who he takes money from. He has taken more money from AIPAC than any politician in history.
Sounds like he has a point of view, right?
Well, he has had a point of view for the rest of his entire political career, we know his point of view. I mean, he's the crime bill guy. He is the Iraq war guy. Like, we know his point of view going back.
He also saved
decades.
us from like a recession. Like, there's something. Trump wanted this country to fail in the last 4 years, and he can't really talk about money because all of his cronies are making money, right? And obviously, the stock market is not the economy, but we didn't really cross over into the zone we were scared of. Like, the country was stable.
This is true. I guess what I'm saying is that Biden is supposed to be the easiest reelection ever, except that he is just a absolutely horrifying candidate at this point. So I'm saying I think they have to replace him, and running him out there is just a huge risk.
When was he supposed to be the easiest reelection ever? Because we all knew that he was only going to run once. And as far as we know, he does not want to do this.
Oh,
but
I'm only talking about... Sure, I'm only talking about the current situation globally. Should have been easy. Like, what's happening in Palestine should not have occurred on this level. And a strong president who cared about, like, American interests, in my opinion, would not have allowed this to exacerbate or escalate in the way that it clearly has, where, there's the estimates are now in like 200,000 people may have died. Biden's foreign policy has been a calamity.
I mean, he kind of fucked up in the last year, and it's hard to tell what kind of feeling we would have had as a voting population if he had done a 180. The world is kind of going through a certain transformation and movement that makes like the French election super interesting this week, right? Like, it was not easy to beat Le Pen. They had to have some strategy, maneuvers. Their coalition had to band together to do it, and they did. But there is an overwhelming global feeling that the dissatisfaction of people are articulating in certain voices. And that voice, like, Trumpism exists without Trump. I think Trumpists are annoyed that he is the one, because he got beat by a corpse 4 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, that was maybe one of the poorest candidates the Dems have ever put up, and to all extensive purpose, like, he destroyed Trump a little bit.
Well, this is kind of what I was trying to get at, is that between Biden's age, between his deeply unpopular policies in the Middle East, at least in terms of from the left, and his absolute scorn of the left, like, this could have been an easy election, but these are all self-inflicted wounds. As I said, a replacement level Democrat who at least kind of acknowledged the left in some way, had a more reasonable, like, foreign policy, in whether it was in Palestine or whether it's in Ukraine, and the economy being what it is, the jobs being what they are, and going up against Donald Trump, who is a madman who attempted a coup. This should have been a cakewalk. And instead we're looking at it like, God damn it, dog. Like,
also,
you might have to step aside.
Also, it might be a cakewalk.
I don't know.
Because up until election night, this is the red wave thing, right? It's just like, holy shit, we're looking at a red wave. 11 p.m. on that night, it's like, no, we're not. This is the exact opposite, right? And this is the whole dead internet theory, if it's just loading, this theory. And the 2000 election was spoken of the same way that we're talking now. It's just like, how did the Dems fuck this up? Should not be this close. Donald Trump is the worst president of all time. This is the easiest election. Turns out it was a very easy election. They lost Georgia.
No, this is true. I'm just saying I think the example you gave of the recent French election is poignant here because all it took was a bit of cooperation between the left and the center left to beat Le Pen. And I don't think that's particularly a different situation here, except for the fact that Biden has alienated the left in a way that is so profound that I think they actually have to replace him with, say, Kamala Harris, who may have similar policies, may be a pill-popping cop, but at the end of the day, she hasn't done the same things that he did when he was in charge.
I am curious to see how much his foreign policy mistakes, in my opinion, matter to voters who might change their minds. Because foreign policy as a whole is never the first thing people say when they consider their vote. They always say the economy, my jobs, security, my children, right? And of course, foreign policy is right after that, immigration. But the minds of voters are tough to read. If someone could do it, they would win every election. But the foreign policy thing, fatigue is a horrible thing, right? And I think the Ukraine war is an example of that. That thing was so present in our minds for so long, and it just feels like we're like, okay, we did that. It's like, no, it's still going on. It's still serious. People are dying. There are consequential things that could still happen, and we cannot take our eye off that ball. But people have moved on to other things, and I think that's just a way news and politics and attention spans work. And November is a few months away, and a lot can change from now until then, including Joe Biden's existence on planet Earth. He may be getting in that Danny Ainge bus, but I think it's going to be hard to tell what people are going to be caring about in October. I don't know.
Look, I'm with you on the lack of primacy that goes along with foreign policy. I agree. Unless it's something like the Iraq War, which was so unpopular because it was American soldiers dying and American money being squandered, and it was on the news every day. That was tremendously unpopular, and Vietnam was in the same category. I don't think these things are in that category for the average voter at all. I guess what I'm saying is what has alienated the left mattered to people on the left, which was a component to this alliance. But his health and his age are something that matter to everyone in his alliance. I think that's what I'm trying to get to. Like, he could have had an alliance with the left, and that may have been effective and done the job, even with him crumbling. I just think there's just too many variables that are stacking up against him, where you've got people who don't like him for legitimate political reasons. Then you don't have people who are excited about voting for a man who would be, I mean, look, the thing about dementia is it doesn't get better with time. And to say we're going to invest 4 years into this guy who basically can't carry on a conversation, it's tough, man.
Yeah, and I've been doing some Kamala Harris kind of investigating, like reading Dana Goodyear's profile, listening to podcasts, not perfect podcasts, but just podcasts about her. She's intriguing. Shout out to Kat Marnell, who's always kind of been pro Kamala. I think she is not like a polished politician. She's a prosecutor, and she is kind of by the books, and she has some kind of contradictions in her policy and her personal life that we know about, weed. And I think having her not as like someone who can reach out and connect with an audience has made her kind of the village idiot for the last 3 years. But when put to task, she is as presidential as the other two dudes who are in this Danny Ainge banana boat. And I think she wipes the floor with these guys. because she's younger and she's intelligent and she's experienced. I don't know if there is a perfect candidate in my mind, but she's good enough.
I mean, I think Harris will benefit from low expectations in the way that her campaign was damaged by higher expectations. Because she was a sensation, when she was, in Congress, grilling people during hearings, that she was a prosecutor and she's smart and competent and ferocious.
Did you not have that joint in your pocket?
Are you not on Ambien right now?
Yeah.
But I think her position under Biden has been, underwritten. And I don't mean underwritten like paid for. I mean, like, her role is not meaty. It's not even it.
Paul-ass roster spot. Yeah. She wasn't utilized correctly.
She wasn't utilized enough. And I don't know why. Is this because the West Exec crew who runs the Biden administration wanted to keep Biden up there as this, corpse mode figurehead instead of elevating Harris as a potential threat to him? I don't know. I don't really know the architecture of who's running the show, because it's not really Biden and it's not Harris, because vice presidents don't have that much power. But I do think that if you put her in a debate against Trump, if you put her on the campaign trail, she can generate enthusiasm that Joe absolutely cannot. And the idea of her being the first woman president instead of Hillary Clinton is awesome in my book.
Zach Edey, MVP of the NBA. Kamala Harris, president, sitting in the White House. It's awesome. It's amazing how we are, as a whole, discussing Kamala Harris's strengths and weaknesses and the potentiality of her getting more power and influence, as opposed to why Donald Trump isn't running with his former VP. Like, what happened there? What happened between Donald Trump and his vice president? Do we know about that?
Did you guys have sort of falling out?
It's like, maybe Kamala's in her feelings. She's just not getting those minutes, those crunch time minutes. She's on the bench. She wants to be in the game. That's like, she's in her feelings about that. What happened to Mike Pence? Like, did Donald Trump have any suggestions for supporters regarding his vice president?
I felt like Mike Pence violated the bro code.
Whoa. He wasn't a good wingman. Like, he in the club, like, Trump is trying to get that bottle service, get the attention of the DJ, of the servers, and Pence was off trying to cozy up to security.
I felt like, Pence may just have been an op.
Oh. Was he a plant? Like a deep state plant? The Swamp Thing?
An Indiana plant?
Like, Donald Trump never suggested his followers hang him, right? Like, break into a government building and hang his vice president.
No, I think it was just kind of like a disagreement between friends. I think they're still cool.
Oh, but can Kamala Harris handle foreign policy? Is she contradicting her stance on her prosecutorial stance on small crimes as opposed to her vice presidential demeanor? Is there a conflict there? I don't know. Anyway,
look, the biggest debate we have here, Andrew, the biggest question: Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, who is your rookie of the year in the WNBA?
Whoever has a better record. It's all about those wins, baby. I'm grilling those enchiladas. I got my chef's sleeve tattoos. I got my grill master attire. Whoever has a better record is the better player.
I think whoever leads the duo in rebounds is the winner.
Wow. Well, it is the most ethical statistic because unlike these chefs and these painters and these writers, I'm shoveling coal over here, getting these boards, stacking bricks.
So this debate, it went from college rivals, Iowa State, LSU, to being in the same draft. And at that point, it was presumed that Caitlin Clark was going to be, a superstar, and Angel Reese would be a good player. But Reese has had some excellent games, and their rivalry, based in some quarters, whether it's on race or culture, has now kept rolling. And we've discussed this a little bit, how the WNBA is still kind of in the 90s. And I have one theory on this, and it's because they just don't have the amount of foreign players. It's tough to do that. It's tough to do that in the NBA right now. You're like, oh, I want to be a culture warrior. Like, all right, so I like the Europeans, like Wemby and Embiid, and not Embiid, but Wemby and Giannis. And, well, that doesn't quite work because that's not really what I'm trying to say. Or, not me, but the cultural warriors. The Europe versus U.S., it just doesn't quite work.
It's still like a young nation, right? And like, they're still trying to form the states and form the identity of their country. And the introduction of Caitlin Clark is incredible. It is the Iversonian effect. It begins, I think, with Caitlin Clark. And there's been inklings of her type of point of view with Sabrina Ionescu, Breanna Stewart. Like, in the way, I don't think the WNBA has to shadow the NBA at all. It's its independent nation. It can break free of England. But, ideas sort of like stretchability, vertical spacing, ideas in the margins that kind of make for a complex fan experience are happening like in real time with the WNBA. And I try to resist the temptation to compare it to the NBA, being like, well, to your point, like, yeah, when is the Manu? When is the Dirk? When is the different kind of cultural injection and clash going to change the scope, the complexion of these games? But maybe we are in still Charles Barkley versus Michael Jordan, or Charles Oakley versus Magic Johnson.
It's not necessarily Bird versus Magic exactly, but there's something about the Iverson comparison to Caitlin Clark which is really funny and maybe prescient, because it's like a cultural flip-flop of the way where Iverson was introducing a younger generation and like hip-hop culture and style and a way of playing into a league that was not conservative exactly. It's the NBA. But he was representative of an alien force that people were hostile towards.
Mm-hmm. He was a threat. He was a gentrifier.
He was but of like a totally flipping of the culture in a way that Caitlin Clark is not solely beloved by like right-wing white people. I mean, everyone likes her. She's good. She's a good player. But the people who are rooting the hardest for her have a cultural investment in almost the way that people who are rooting for Allen Iverson, like ourselves, had a cultural investment in the summer of 1996 when the NBA began.
Mm-hmm. And it's disingenuous because it really doesn't reflect the performance on the court, because in a vacuum, Caitlin Clark is a GOAT potential and Angel Reese is awesome. Completely different worlds. Like, you cannot compare DeMar DeRozan to Paul George. You can try, but like, we're dealing with two different things, right? And to your point, it feels like politics. Whatever you believe in, this is ethical basketball again. I think we're arguing about what we're comfortable with, and the stories in which we've decided are true versus evolving beyond that. It's like, are we ready to change yet, or are we comfortable with the things we know?
And I will say that Caitlin Clark still turns the ball over a lot. She's been really good lately.
And I hate to be that guy, those sizzles, but like, you kind of, those, you know, we had this argument about turnovers in the NBA a few months ago. And, you know, I said that turnovers kind of are the ultimate sin of a possession. You don't want to give away a possession. And you express something that is kind of true too, which is even more true, maybe, is like, not all turnovers are created equal. And certain players who commit certain turnovers are so valuable in their court spacing and vision and geometry that you live with that, because in the end, you're going to win that game.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to this is a good example. This is more NBA. Tyrese Maxey is an awesome player. Fantastic assist-to-turnover ratio. That's valuable. Him not turning the ball over is valuable. He's a scorer. He creates some assists, but that's generally just like passing the ball. You know, he drives, he kicks the ball to somebody. He's not really creating in the same way of like a James Harden. And this is why, look, there are people like Tyrese Halliburton who can act in both roles with super low turnovers, and that's really important. And I think this idea that we discussed a few years back about James Harden in particular, how many turnovers he had, ethical basketball, is that the NBA with spacing has made it easier for guys who are not elite passers to generate opportunities and assists with lower risk of turnover. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just occurred. You know, LeBron turned the ball over a ton. Trae Young turned the ball over a ton. That Luka Doncic turns the ball over a ton. That model of the, you know, heliotropic superstar who you run the whole offense through, they were naturally going to create turnovers. And now you can look at, say, a team like the Celtics, for example, who don't have great passers, but can spread the floor and move the ball around, where they can kind of minimize turnovers and don't necessarily need to rely on someone who is a fantastic passer to get open looks. So it's this adjustment of the game, and I think there will be an adjustment back when you get guys like Jokic or maybe Wemby, and they're going to figure out ways to take that spacing and be even more incredible at generating shots for their teammates without causing that many turnovers either. Like, this is all a cyclical thing here. It's always going to come back to the ability to be a brilliant passer is valuable. But I think this is where we're at with Caitlin Clark, right? This league is not caught up exactly in the same ways that these transformations of the NBA, where she is figuring out how to be a James Harden and how to be a Steph Curry or a LeBron, an offensive linchpin that can generate 20 points a game, but also 12 assists. And just half of your team's, 75% of your team's points are coming from one person.
Yeah, and, you know, if you hit your teammate in the hands, like, I don't know what more you can do. And, you know, there's going to be adjustment on both sides. Teammates will start expecting those passes and chemistry, all that. I feel like this is an awesome debate. I am here for the Caitlin Clark everything. And there's a fatigue growing in my circles of just like, I don't want to talk about Caitlin Clark. It's so boring. And I'm like, dude, we argue about LeBron versus Michael Jordan for the last like 10 years. Like, this is what we do. This is great. Just say you don't want to talk about basketball because, like,
right.
This is awesome. And I do want to compare, to finish my earlier thought, I do want to compare the WNBA to the NBA because that's a rich resource of basketball information that we can transmute and transfer, right? And it tells us, it simulated something that we can reference. So for what is actually sexist? Dismissing it or taking it seriously?
Yeah, this is true. I don't know. I just really think we, as usual, are really correct. And no, in compartmentalizing that the WNBA is not in the same era as the NBA. And
Not yet. Yeah.
it's not there. And this is not a comment on the style of play or the quality of play. We're just talking culturally and conversationally and its position within how we discuss sports. And it's going in that direction. And the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese thing is fantastic for that. And when people say, well, look, I value Caitlin Clark's assists and her scoring and her three-point shooting and her spacing, and she's running the offense, and someone says, yeah, but she's turning the ball over rampantly, she's taking too many threes, she's not a good defender. I like Angel Reese. Angel Reese is crashing the board, she's scoring some points, she's a better defender. I'm like, great. These are actual basketball arguments.
Yes.
We're not talking about like, ha, 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 imagine a girl playing ball.
You don't know
No.
ball. Yeah, it's just
No,
like,
we're talking hoops. And like,
Yes.
as you said, if you don't want to talk about that, you don't like Sacramento Kings basketball, baby.
Right. It's like, yeah, I'll be tuning into the Clippers versus the Nuggets until 1 a.m. tonight. It's just like, I'm so tired of it. I'm like, I get it. Like, the Bears should not be for everyone. Basketball should not be for everyone. The WNBA should not be for everyone. It's like, you know what? I don't like this debate. I'm like, I bet you don't. But I agree with you. Arguing the difference between a traditional big, the value of a traditional big versus like a court spacer, passer, someone strange, is like never ending and delicious. And I love this shit. Like Moses Malone versus Allen Iverson. Like, okay, bring out those beers.
You know what we're going to do? We're going to talk Meaty or ick.
Meaty or ick. But you know what I mean. It's just like, I think one of our friends posted something being like, you guys weren't talking shit about Moses Malone, so now all of a sudden Angel Reese ain't good. And I'm like, yo, this is crazy. I had not thought about Moses Malone for a while, but like, I am willing to talk shit about him. I just went on Twitter and I was like, I think Kevin Garnett's better than Michael Jordan, because like, things have to change. Everything in life changes. Neighborhoods, the value of money, music, food, every single thing in this world changes, including basketball. It's not trapped in amber. And the discussions supporting that are so much fun to have.
And my take is, how dare you? How dare you compare her to Moses Malone? Come on.
I'm not sure whose side you're on here, though. I'm like, yes, drag Reese or Moses. Which one?
I'm on the Moses side. That's one of the most underrated players ever. It's not just because he was a good rebounder. He's a GOAT. Come on. Compare her to, as you were saying, compare her to Andre Drummond. like why is Moses getting dragged into this? But as we like basketball, so it's great.
Shout out to plumbers. I don't know why they catch so many strays. Like, plumbers are very valuable people who will shit in my bathroom the first thing they do when they come in the door. Like, we don't have to use that analogy for Moses Malone's era, right? They could be like stockbrokers. Oh, it's just Moses and a bunch of stockbrokers.
Bunch of admin.
Yeah. They can't touch glass. Get out of here. Plumbers can probably touch glass and porcelain.
I mean, I guess it's a nod to the league not being professionalized yet, but you could totally do that with that. You know, these are a bunch of lawyers running around out there.
Yeah, these are a bunch of chiropractors shooting bricks, laying bricks. Not like real bricklayers. Who could probably
Speaking of
touch
real
glass.
bricklayers,
Oh no, who's the ire of this analogy?
let's talk about your man, Klay Thompson. Most known for going 0 of 10 in an elimination game, the longtime member of the Golden State Warriors dynasty, or would-be dynasty, or so-called dynasty, has decamped to Dallas, joining Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving on last year's finals loser, who is Well, if we're even going to say there was a finals this year.
Dallas
Debatable.
BBQ chicken. Yeah, man.
The asterisk season. But Klay Thompson, Dallas, how do you feel about the splintering apart of the Golden State Warriors dynastic squad?
Whatever. Time is time. And whoever signed, I think Myers was one of his last big moves was to sign Jordan Poole. People blame it on Draymond Green's punch and his demeanor. Draymond Green is the reason why they're still good. Draymond Green is the reason why we're talking about this team at all, along with obviously a healthy Klay and Steph. But they pushed him out the door. He wanted money. They wouldn't give it to him. Something happened with Andrew Wiggins that we still don't know about. That's not our business. But that kind of dissolved on them. So I think business is business here. I know Klay does, I'm sure. But that ended in kind of a melancholy way because I really enjoyed those three players for a long time. I would have just signed him for that money, but you're trying to win games, and Nepo baby Mike Dunleavy Jr. is trying to make the last years of Curry valuable still. So re-signing Klay for, I think he wanted more than $20 million or around $20 million, if I'm not mistaken, was not the way to win games because he had depreciated to the point where he was not up to replacement level quite.
Yeah, he was coming off the bench, to give $20 million to him out of sentimental value, and or looking for...
Not with that hard apron.
Yeah. I mean,
apron.
I guess for me, looking at that Golden State dynasty, as someone who was often a justified critic...
Justified. You called them frauds and they won the championship. You called the last 4 championships frauds and then they all won.
Well, that's neither here nor there.
All right, we'll get to that later.
What I'm saying about Golden State was that they earned my respect.
I love it.
By sticking together and eking out that one last bullshit chip. Like, seriously, they did. Because up until then, they'd really just kind of won one title before KD got there. And they weren't good for that long. They had a strange rise and fall. But I really do respect them now because they stuck it out.
Sure,
and they won that. They won that. Yeah,
sure,
no, I'm just for those who are unacquainted with my correct view. But I don't think they owed us.
Try to win one real one.
But they did. They won one real one. They did it. And them winning that late championship, I think, proved the value of keeping that crew together longer than they needed to. And they stuck with it, and they got that extra chip, and they really solidified themselves as like a true dynasty, I thought, with that. And just at least to me. But they don't have to do that anymore. They did it. So when people say, I wish they could have figured this out and they could have kept Klay there, that would have been cool to have him spend his whole career in Golden State and, him and Curry and Draymond all retire together, solely being Warriors. But I don't think that's necessary. I think they proved everything they needed to do in a Warriors uniform. And this is the way that dynasties fall apart. And I look at the Bulls dynasty and its sort of artificial ending where Phil Jackson leaves, MJ bounces, the team trades everybody, and it was just over. And the Golden State dynasty feels more like life, and they did what they're supposed to do, and like good luck to Klay, good luck to the Warriors. And I'm not saying I want to see Curry go play for another team or Draymond do the same, but they have nothing left to prove to us. They should live out your lives how you want. You're in retirement now.
I mean, yeah, I am one for flowery narratives and the ideas of the process and dynasties and friendship. I could give a fuck about Villanova. I could give a fuck about did the process work or not. And this Warriors team was over last year. Poor Forever broke overnight. They broke overnight last season. So if I were a Warriors fan, specifically, I would ask myself the question, like, do I want this for my memory or do I want to win more games? Kind of tough to decide. I would side on winning more games because it just goes by too fast, and Steph Curry is still a top 10 player. Klay was bad last year, and he kind of recovered from his catastrophic injuries in a way, but mentally is more complicated. And there was chatter of him being there's a leaker, there's a rat in Golden State. Whoever put out that pool footage, whoever leaked that, like, Klay was really tough to be around and he was just sulking around. Yeah, Klay kind of saw the writing on the wall, and he kind of understood time better than his other guys who, Dre and Steph didn't have career-threatening injuries. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Klay was melancholy because his body didn't respond to his brain, and he was no longer the good ISO defender. He was no longer the knockdown shooter. He was no longer quick. His brain moved faster than his body, and that's sad. That's just getting older. They're probably better without him, which sounds heartless, but, like, your boy Buddy Hield is there, and they added slow-mo. Like, this team is as formidable as it was last year, if not more, but it doesn't have the aura.
Yeah, and again, I think they didn't pull the plug on this team prematurely. They gave it a shot. They gave it a shot. They let it wheeze to, its deathbed in this current incarnation. And that doesn't mean that you have to let Klay Thompson play in a Warriors uniform for as long as he wants, for as much money as he wants. Like, those just are not the requirements of this situation. I mean, the guy is going to be 35 this year. He's come back from injuries. He's clearly not the same. If he said, hey, I'll stay here for $8 million, but if he wanted 20, you don't have to give it to him. It's just that's not the requirement for seeing this through. It goes both ways. I didn't think last year he was horrendous or anything, but he wasn't that great. Mm-hmm.
Klay did something incredibly smart and ethical and incredibly dumb. The first ethical, smart thing he did was give the Lakers the middle finger. Sort of like when Starks was traded to the Bulls. He was like, I'd rather retire. Fuck that team forever. I think Klay is just like, fuck the Lakers. My father's calling games. It's LeBron. LeBron wants me. He wants to take a pay cut for me. I would never put on the gold and purple. Ethical king right there, I think. But he did something really stupid, in my opinion, or maybe not as savvy, which was he identified his need, which was he wants to win games. But he identified the wrong team, because the Mavericks were a 5th seed that got incredibly lucky. I don't think they're title contenders, even with him. They are not top dogs in the West. I wish he had gone with someone better. But he's like not that good anymore. Shout out to Klay Thompson, who I love as a player, his career, but he's not good anymore.
And I look at Dallas, and I don't love the pickup for them, but I get why they did it too.
Sure. Because
you got Luka, you got Kyrie, and the Celtics exploited the fact that the other players they put around that star duo, they could hit some baseline threes, but once you started getting them up, above the free throw extended, above the arc, you could live with it. And
there's always a place for a shooter.
And whatever Klay's shooting was in an elimination game, going 0 of 10, you still don't leave him open. You can't leave Klay Thompson open.
You might, if you're a smart coach, maybe you do, right?
I mean, it's possible, but generally speaking, you just don't.
Yeah.
You just don't leave Klay Thompson open. Like
Right.
He's even me as a Klay Thompson skeptic at this stage of his career. When he puts up a shot, I'm generally like off, like, I'm not worried. But you still got to guard him. That's
for sure.
His track
Culture
record is
culture.
too high.
Yeah, I mean, if he drops 9 threes on you, you're not like, well, that came out of nowhere. He has a reputation.
Yeah.
He
And I
keeps the
think even
defense honest, is what you're saying.
I think he really does, because even though teams are disciplined, I do think if you see Klay Thompson out there wide open, you're you're kind of not feeling great about it.
But wouldn't you rather have seen Klay like in San Antonio? Wouldn't that been more fun? Are they as good as the Mavs right now?
Andrew, I'm a big fan of that. What you just asked. No, seriously. Who
Yeah,
has a
I'm
better
serious.
record next year?
Yeah.
The Mavs or the Spurs?
I mean, with everyone healthy, I think it's quite possibly the Spurs, especially with their additions of Harrison Barnes this week. I don't. We talked about Castle last week and CP3, but like Wemby's going to be a year older. Like they could win some games. Wemby is the best defender in the NBA.
I mean, is Wemby going to be the best player in the NBA this year? I don't know. I think he's going to be top 5. He might be the best.
Not to
He's
talk.
just stupid.
Yeah.
He's just stupid. I don't even need a big Wemby conversation. He's just stupid. And he does so much. I was going to say on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
That you add like Chris Paul, just a functional, smart guy who can defend
Lob.
still, who can throw lobs, who can shoot. You put on Barnes, who I'm not crazy about, but he's a functional NBA player.
It makes him interesting again, right?
I mean, as interesting as Harrison Barnes can be.
Exactly, right? And not to talk about a third rail world, but gambling and fantasy wise, like I remember last year we had done a draft and someone paid like $60 for Wemby, and me and you were both like, that's the last time he's going to be under 80. We should have just taken him. He's like a number 3 overall pick at this point. Like you're banking on him to be the elite of elite bigs, right?
Oh, of course. And you know, someone like Barnes, who there are parts of his game I don't love. He seems like one of those dudes who every now and then gets a ball and it's like, it's time for Harrison Barnes to take a shot. And those are guys that I don't generally really enjoy having around. Yeah. But that said, he has a pretty good diet of, you know, taking and making threes going back to 2015. He's shooting 38% on 4 a game. And now all of his minutes are pretty much a power forward. That's a good duo.
I like
you know, he can rebound enough. You got Wemby, you got a floor spacer. He's not a passer or a creator, but he knows how to play. So I like Barnes there as a functional player in a way that, you know, Sochan wasn't necessarily.
Sohan was weird.
Yeah, whatever. Sohan, yeah. Sohan's still gonna play.
Yeah, and they had him out of position for a lot of the times. They were just kind of trying to figure out this thing that no one has seen before. Is this team like Klay Thompson should have signed with the Spurs, right? Like this team is going to be the team that makes noise. I'm a Mavs skeptic a little bit, you know. Never doubt the god, a GOAT player like Luka, but their front line is not skilled enough to compete against these big dogs.
I mean, I think the Mavs will be good too. I think this is less a criticism of the Mavs than looking at the upside of a Spurs team where, I mean, here's the thing that's amazing about Wemby, among zillions, is just that we still don't know, and we're only getting inklings of what Wemby will look like as a superstar. And I think it's just going to arrive faster than we imagine.
I
think he's a mix of Jokic in terms of bringing the ball down and playing like LeBron at the point and controlling the offense as a floor spacer also. Yeah. I just don't think this idea that he's going to get strong and then operate from the block is even in play at this point. Like, he may do that. I just don't think that's what he's going to do.
I think internationally right now for France, he's like he's the finesse guy. I think he's taking some threes, and the plan, like, I hate the Mitch Robinson, like, bulking up, kind of like taking away his speed and his weirdness. Let Wemby be weird. Let him be the alien, bro. And have you seen those shoes out in the wild? Are they in the basement with Vision Pros?
I
Shoe dudes.
I don't know that they've actually put out real Wembies yet.
Okay, so that was just a prototype or a leak?
Yeah, I think they leaked the logo, and then I believe the other ones were someone inventing them. Like this is like using AI to like be like this is what the Wemby shoe could look like. I think because the Wemby 1 is not out, and he's not wearing like a Wemby.
What the hell? This is like some Hawk Tua slow release. Yo, like, let's get to it. Kids should have been wearing Wembys this summer.
I mean, takes a little while. Well, he's wearing the he's wearing new sneakers, but they're the GT.
Right.
I think it's the GT Hustle 3 is what he's wearing.
I mean, it took
which
Luka
are cool. Which are cool.
Yeah.
The GTs are good.
Yeah. Do you think the Thunder got better with Hartenstein? Do you think Chet Hartenstein, aka Cookies and Cream, are final shoo-ins?
I mean, the biggest point about Klay going anywhere in the West is what the hell you got to go through.
The West is very good. The East is good.
I want to win.
The West is very good.
The East is good. I want to win a title. I'm going to go to the Mavs. Like,
what the fuck? Yeah.
I mean, I know they were in the finals, but it's a little different. They
Yeah,
were
dude.
A 5 seed, so you got to go through Minnesota again. You got to go through Jokic and Denver again. You got to go through OKC, who's going to be
is
better.
There. LeBron lives.
LeBron's
still.
around. Wemby is morphing into a monster before our eyes.
It's rough out there, and like the Kings, I don't know. Like I kind of want to touch on Hartenstein before we get into DeMar Derozan, but Hartenstein got his.
The Grizzlies are going to be good.
Zach Edey.
All right, but no, they're going to be good. If Ja's healthy, they're going to be good. Okay, let's talk Hartenstein for a second here, though. I did not think anyone would offer him $30 million a year.
It's crazy. Shout
Did not
out
see that
to
coming.
Hartenstein. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I hate the apron. I want all these guys to get paid, but I'm a fan of him, and get your money, dude.
And I think he benefited from a rare set of circumstances where there were not very many good, legit centers on the market, and one team who had a specific need for that and a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. We've seen really good centers not get very much money because of the opposite set of circumstances. Oh, there's a bunch of good big men out there, and a lot of suitors. Not the case.
And
OKC clearly cleared this money. They wanted a interior presence, and they went and got one.
this is always like when I hear people say like the price for contemporary artwork is insane. Like these cannot cost more than a house. I'm like, well, Paul George, for example. It's like, why did he cost 3 times as much as DeMar Derozan? If there's 2 people who want you, it's not a reflection of the market. It's a reflection of need, right? We went through years of trying to figure out what a fungible token was. A painting is one of one. If you fall in love with it and someone else does, it's going to drive the price up. It's not a reflection of the market. It's a reflection of the thing and someone who wants that thing. And OKC wanted that thing.
And I do think the Knicks probably were down to pay him a good amount, but they just couldn't give him 30.
It was the rules. They were capped at 18, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, great. I like Hartenstein so much. He's a backup center, man. Like, he's a great backup center. But, like, I think the Thunder are more exciting with him and can probably do damage. But, like, Mikal Bridges is a top 75 player. Hartenstein is a backup center. But these are important pieces. And if you need a player in the margins and all the guys are off the board, you're going to have to pay for them.
But the weird thing about him being a backup center is that he's probably a top 25 center. You know, like there are teams that there are teams that he is better than the current starter,
but his
they don't
value
still
is
wanna,
off the bench, right?
Sort of. I mean, that was his value with the Knicks, obviously. I mean that it's weird. Mikal Bridges is like a top 70 player, but Hartenstein might be at least average at his position.
I like him so much. As soon as you pay a player in the margin star money, they change. Then they kind of have to be stars, just because of the dumb salary cap.
Assuming health is, as a baseline for all teams involved, I don't see OKC losing in the West. That team is, with Caruso and Hartenstein, that team is gnarly. And they lost, I think Giddey's could be a good player, but he wasn't a major contributor on that team. Down the line, we may say that they lost the trade if Giddey emerges and becomes, a triple-double machine on Chicago and all that, between, of course, Meaty or Ick. But OKC this year, with Caruso and Hartenstein, their defense is going to be insane. The offense is going to be extremely good. They're going to be good on the boards. I don't know how you beat that team. I mean, that's a squad.
The description of Shea being the toughest offensive player to guard because he moves backwards and forwards at the same time was so beautiful. I thought that was just like, I think, who said Trey? I think said it from New Orleans, but like, it is such a great way to describe that superstar. And like, I want that team to win the championship or multiple championships so much because that team build is so weird and constructed aggressively through trades and through investing of draft picks that, like, in my opinion, that kind of behavior should be rewarded with some victories.
It's funny that we look at their rebuild and view it as intense tanking, and that was part of it. But in the same way that, Philly's rebuild with Hinkie was fast, we're talking about 2.5 seasons.
Yep.
Like, it wasn't that they were bad for 10 years, which is now the idea that people describe with the Sixers. Well, they're bad for 35 years. Of course they ended up with some good players. Like, no, they tanked for like 2.5 years. Or
you don't have to do it for long.
Yeah, and that's what happened in OKC. They went with the burn it all down, but in the process they got back SGA, and then they got back the picks that became Jalen Williams, and now Giddey was then traded, and
Chet.
They signed people and cleared the books. They did this fast, aggressively. This is how you're supposed to do it.
And they missed out on a lot of picks. Like Poku ends up being not in the NBA. Osman Jang, like, probably is not going to pan out. Like, they tried the wet noodle thing and they got one. That's all you want.
Right. And yeah, there was a couple other guys in that mix too that they've traded off as well.
Yeah, I believe most of them are like not in the NBA anymore, which is wild. But a lot of Knicks people in their feelings, and I was kind of sad he left too, but not really. But the people who I talked to were like, why would you leave New York City for Oklahoma City? Like, that is just a life decision I would not make. You take less money to play in the Mecca. I'm like, dude, he doesn't want to live in Tarrytown anymore. Because, like, let's be honest, he's not at Lavo Meatballs. He's, like, resting up near the practice facility. And then he's on the road to Indiana or Oklahoma City. And the money difference is just too big. Like, whatever, he can come back to New York if he wants to. I think the door is always open if he is up for, like, a free agent signing down the road. But he enters a great situation in Oklahoma City. That team looks like they're having fun, as much fun as the Villanova Knicks.
I agree with that. And also, the guy I was thinking of was Trey Mann, another top 18 pick.
Oh, he's
that
still in
didn't
the league.
pan out.
Yeah.
Funny
is he
enough,
still in the league?
Last I heard from him, I want to say he was on Charlotte. I could be wrong. I think that's where he was.
Charlotte. What are they doing over there?
Yeah, that's a different conversation. Just weirdly looking at OKC's draft history, I mean, as you said, they're moving around a lot. The guys they've technically drafted that are interesting are Emmanuel Quickley, technically drafted.
Sure.
Miles McBride, technically drafted. Sengun, technically drafted. I mean, they were just moving around the draft, but yeah, they've had an interesting draft history. They've made tons of moves, and there was kind of a little tango with the OKC and the Knicks during the last draft, where they were just kind of flopping trades back and forth throughout the whole thing.
They're day traders, right? They're guys who kind of stick by their computer and kind of move stocks around, and sometimes end up with GameStop at the right time. And then there's another strategy, which is just like build, throw pieces of clay onto the pieces of clay. Sort of like DeMar DeRozan adding to Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, right?
This strikes me a little bit like the conversation we had last week about the Pelicans, where in the way that OKC has a worldview, we know what they're trying to do. Okay, you're going to draft for length. Now you're drafting for defense. Now you're drafting for value. You're making these moves. And then you look at the Kings like, what are you trying to build here? Okay, you got this high-speed team where you're running the dribble handoff, and it's based on Sabonis and Fox and their excellence at that, and adding shooters that surround you. You're like, well, what about DeMar DeRozan, a guy who takes no threes and loves jab-stepping and taking mid-range jumpers? I think he's a good fit for what we're doing.
Weird.
In the same way I looked at last week and said, I really want Pelicans to run through Zion, but instead, now it's going to be the DeJounte Murray show. What do you like this for the Kings, or does it bug you in the same way it bugs me that the Pelicans don't have a worldview?
Leading the witness, but I think adding DeMar DeRozan doesn't hurt your team ever. He's a good player who is good at stuff. I know they're not calling fouls in the way they did because they changed the rules on us. But like, he kind of has an efficiency to him by getting to the line, by hitting free throws. I hate this move because it doesn't make them that much better. It doesn't make them into contenders. It doesn't change the view, to your point, of what they're trying to do. They're just being like, let's just get better at what we do. And I'm like, but I thought what you did was pace and De'Aaron Fox and transition. Sabonis is already a stationary kind of force. And if we want to compare players, like that Angel Reese kind of prototype, he kind of shies away from the three-point line more than I'd like him to, but is a devastating rebounder and a very trustworthy scorer. This team ain't beaten Oklahoma City, Minnesota, probably not the Mavs. This team is kind of the best a small market team can do, right?
Yeah, I think
small market.
No, I understand what you're saying. Is like, if you're a small market team and you're OKC, you're not relying on talent from elsewhere to lead the charge. You're adding a Hartenstein as supporting talent that you're overpaying, and that's what you can do as a small market team. When you're the Sacramento Kings, you're doing the same thing with DeMar DeRozan. You're saying, well, we can't really recruit elite talent to come here. The talent we have isn't good enough to win, so we need just more talent. Yeah. How do we get more talent in this building? Well, DeMar DeRozan. If we can figure out how to use him at 34, 35 years old, who still has a useful skill set, maybe we can cook. It's just a talent deficit. And you say, well, perhaps we can sort this shit out. I look at it and say, this doesn't fit what you're doing. And like, yeah, but maybe we should do something else. What we were doing wasn't going to win with what we had. And I don't know how we were going to get that much better. We had the best offense in history 2 years ago. So maybe DeMar DeRozan, as a wrinkle to what we're doing, can make us better. We know he's a good basketball player.
Ron Adiva's like, I can change him. I can save him.
Not exactly. Not saying I subscribe to this philosophy. I just feel like you would have to subscribe to this philosophy in order to make this move.
Yeah, and the last big pieces on the table as of this recording were him and Lauri Markkanen. And it seems like Lauri Markkanen's price tag is huge because from beyond the grave, Danny Ainge and Joe Biden are asking probably for many draft picks and like young players and all that. And DeMar Derozan wasn't that expensive in terms of collateral. So if I was a Kings fan, I'd be like, that's fine. When the dust settles, like we got one of the guys.
I think you can also look at it and say the odds of us winning as currently constructed were approaching zero. And when I say winning, I mean even making it to the conference finals or let alone the finals. We're very close to zero.
I agree.
DeRozan, in theory, may be better. In theory.
Yeah. I mean, he's an all-star, right? In a vacuum, like he is a star. But this is like, as a long-suffering Knicks fan, in my black and white makeup on my face and a top hat, I think this is the move that I dread, which is the aging star who doesn't quite add as much on the court in terms of actions as they do in terms of like a spiritual way.
And I think you could also look at it and say, you had Dante DiVincenzo. You had him. That's a useful guy. He fits your system. He would have been great. But you moved him.
I mean, a lot of teams gave up on Dante. Slam Gennaro.
Oh, I agree. I just mean you let him walk. And he's a guy who would have been really excellent to have on your team. But
he only played 25 games with them. That's crazy. Moonlighting.
I'm not. I just mean. Sorry to interrupt. I just meant like, if you would say who would help your team more right now, DeMar DeRozan or Dante DiVincenzo, I think Dante would be your answer.
I know. Do you think there is some truth to like players who can handle the gravity of the moment? Dante has proved that he can, obviously, but at the time, he was a player in the margins, and we know, everyone knows, players in the margins win games and playoff series. But there's a difference between him at that time and a star player, right? Like, there are players who just have a different kind of team building gravity and on-court gravity. Like DeMar kind of leans on this religion.
Yeah, I mean, I like DeMar. He's a good player. I just we all know he is a little retrograde in his skill set, and he was utilized in San Antonio in a smart way, putting him at power forward, and then Chicago did a lot of the same tactics by making him a kind of a small ball four, which presumably the Kings are going to do as well.
Does he benefit? Does he get that Kendrick boost or that Kendrick? What's the opposite of the boost?
The Kendrick slump.
Yeah, the Kendrick curse. Because, man, I know he's a star, but like I don't see him as good as your guy Dante, or the amount of touches he's gonna get. Like, is he more effective than Harrison Barnes? Yeah, but by how much?
I mean, I like him better than Barnes, but he also can't space the floor like Barnes.
And his usage is much higher than Barnes. He demands more of your pie during a game. It's fine. It's really beige.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to get to. I'm like, they weren't going to win without him. They are not going to win with him. Okay. Best of luck. Before we get out of here, you had made a point when we were chatting before the show, and you said Sixers GM Daryl Morey won the summer.
However,
give me a little take on that.
I think when the Harden situation went down, he was desperately trying to clear space for a star. Looking into the horizon, it was going to be Paul George. Joel Embiid's window is now. He got Paul George. I know the big three model is kind of debated, but he identified. Did he draft Tyrese Maxey?
Yeah, I don't know if it was his scouting because he'd just been hired, but that was Morey's best draft. And I'm not saying that with any judgment on who made those calls. He was in charge, so he gets credit, but it was Morey, or I'm sorry, it was Maxey, Isaiah Joe, Basketball Paul, and Charles Bassey, who's now on the Spurs, were all from that draft.
He's not bad. So, like, obviously, the ultimate goal is to win a championship. But Morey's promise was to surround Embiid with a chance to win. Injuries derail them. I still think they're the better team than the Knicks, but the Knicks got it done. This is an awesome result of his tenure in Philly. Max contracts. I don't love him as much as other people. I think he's a bit one-dimensional for me, but is a really good player. You have him on lock. You've acquired Paul George, who's like old, unsexy. People are tired of him, fatigue. People roasted him, then respected him, now just don't want to think about him. He's a good defender. He's a smart player. He's one of the pieces that fits perfectly next to your generational center.
One thing to that point. Oh, sorry. No, you were leading it. No, you were leading up to a good point. I want to hear it. Sorry.
Removing Tobias Harris from the equation is going to do wonders for this team in the RJ Barrett Knicks way. I think not only adding these pieces, it's like your diet, right? You cannot eat more salad and get healthier. It's what you take away from your diet that ultimately makes you healthy. Respect to Tobias Harris, who's a great businessman, who's a really good basketball player. He's not on the Sixers anymore, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, when I look at the Philly rotation and it's a distinct lack of passing, it does bug me as someone who is dime maxed, assist pilled. Like, I want to see some passing, and Philly has irked me over the years with its lack of high basketball IQ.
Even McCain, though?
McCain, I just haven't seen him play enough. But I also think, I don't think he's going to be a notable passer, but we'll see. But I also think that, I've been spoiled. I've watched Harden and Simmons and Butler and some guys who really are good passers. Al Horford's a good passer for a big man. But currently they just don't have any of those kind of guys in this team. I also think that maybe I am underestimating what it's like not to have Tobias Harris on the team for 6 years as like the NBA's worst decision maker, foremost coagulant of like offensive stagnates,
also
and defensive. He's an assassin, but I in my mind I may be dealing with generational trauma about the fact that
the bear too.
That Tobias Harris has gummed up the offense for so long that they've needed these advanced passers to make up for that fact. And maybe you don't. Maybe if you get him off the court and you have regular guys who can pass, like Embiid and Maxey and Paul George and a couple other guys.
Kyle Lowry coming back?
Lowry. I think I do not believe that Kelly Oubre is going to be starting for the team that long.
It's Caleb Martin, right?
Martin's going to start, probably, but I think Oubre gets traded in like December, January, whenever he can be traded.
He's a useful player.
I think they re-signed him to trade him, personally speaking.
Fair enough.
But yeah, without Tobias Harris, maybe I'm underestimating the benefit of his absence.
Yo, just flip him for Caleb Martin, who's like a fine player. I like how tall he is. He's not great. He's not bad. But like that exchange of minutes is a big swing, I think. Sort of like putting Josh Hart where RJ Barrett used to be.
You know what else is a big swing, Andrew?
His pod.
Pod? Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.